What human experience is relatable in the story? Death. Thank you. And so it's the attitude to death. Now, thank you for bringing that up. And is there anything else you'd like to see? That how should we see death? I mean, how did Gilgamesh react to death? How did Enkidu react to death? And how should we act to death? Based on the story. What is the story telling us about death? How should we relate to it? Anyone? It's so interesting, the whole story, and especially for me, and especially in light of what wrote in her essay on death and the mythological world. Maybe perhaps she could summarize what you wrote in that essay from that you submitted to me.
I can try.
Yes, please.
I'll just find it. I just basically wrote about how nowadays we're afraid of death than they were in the mythological world. And perhaps more afraid of it because we don't know about it, like we don't have these stories about what happens. It's actually the not knowing that we're afraid of rather than death.
So, thank you for that. I like to show this. Can I read it for them?
You can.
Yes, because some of them haven't done it, so it just gives them an idea of what it is. So here is an essay. Can you see that? Can everybody see that? Yeah, so death and the mythological world. No one is actually dead until the ripples they have caused in this world die away. By Terry, the great novelist. I haven't read any of his books, but I know friends of mine who read him. Okay, in mythology, the perspective of life and death is quite different to the modern world. I will touch on the death myth of ancient Egypt. I have chosen this myth as I believe it represents an interesting view on death that can also relate to the modern world. Today, our relationship with death has changed dramatically from that of our ancestors. For centuries now, we have come to fear death. However, it is not truly death we fear but our ignorance. Many beliefs and death myths do not view death as the end of life but the beginning of a new phase. The ancient Egyptians had such beliefs, also being one of the few civilizations to believe that a person could bring their belongings into the afterlife. In the ancient Egyptian culture, a corpse would go through many rituals in preparation for the afterlife. One of these rituals is mummification of the body. This was carried out to keep the body from rotting as the soul made its journey to the afterlife. The ancient Egyptians believed that after death, the soul would begin a journey to the afterlife. Following the path of the sun god Ra as he would travel after disappearing with the setting sun under the earth and back to the east where he would rise. After many trials, the soul would stand in front of the 42 judges and the god of the underworld Osiris and swear he had not committed a length of his sins. After this, the weighing of the heart, Anubis, the god of mummification, would hold a set of scales with an ostrich feather to represent truth and the dead person's heart on to the other heart on the other to represent their life. If a person's heart was not in balance with the feather, their soul would be subject to many horrific fates. However, if their heart was in balance with the feather, the person would proceed to the plains of Araru, where they would be in eternal paradise. Though the ancient Egyptians had a more processed idea of life after death, some believed they were still fearful of death, and this is why they had so many rituals to prepare the dead for their journey. I believe this myth can relate to both modern idea of rebirth and the idea of your physical life determining the quality of your afterlife, which we see in many beliefs such as karma and the idea of heaven and hell. In conclusion, I believe that death is something to be feared, much like the ancient myths. Death is not something to be feared, much like the ancient myths. If we are not to fear death, we must discuss it as to let go of ignorance and gain knowledge. My reaction to that is that in Egyptian times, when they mummify something, it's not only to preserve the physical body. When your body is kept, in this physical world, the soul spirit of that body stays around the body for a long, long time. So in a way, for the Egyptians, it's a way for them to remain in contact with the soul spirit of that human being. And that's one idea that they mummify. Yeah. But oftentimes, this kind of thoughts are not proclaimed or narrated everywhere. So it's a way of keeping the souls around them so they can communicate with the spiritual world. And it's a very interesting essay you wrote there. And so that's one idea, is keeping in contact with the dead. But it's also true that Egyptians fear death. That's why they have so many rituals. And I agree with you that we should be talking more about it. You know, we don't know enough about it. And this is where the ancient civilizations are more advanced than the modern human being. We don't really know much about death and dying compared to them. But now, later on, and it's probably not for me to talk about it, is there now are modern studies on death and dying, and people who claim to have died and saw something and came back to life. And so these are studies on near-death experiences. But for now, this is not really a topic that we can talk about, but perhaps maybe the next teacher will come and talk to you about it. But no, it's all a very interesting study. Now, in addition to your relating death to the myth of ancient Egypt and particularly Osiris, I'd like to also say that almost at the same time that this death ritual of ancient Egyptians was done in relation to Osiris, this story of Gilgamesh was also kind of composed. So while the Egyptians are doing their mummification, the ancient Sumerians or Mesopotamians were also hearing the story of Gilgamesh. And they happened almost at the same time because the civilization of Egypt ran to the civilization of Mesopotamia. They kind of run side by side, and often they have quarrels with each other. And so I'd like to say this because it's very interesting that in ancient Mesopotamia and in the story of Gilgamesh, people now don't want to die. And that's why the story of Gilgamesh is a representative of the idea of not dying. So here, Gilgamesh don't want to die, and this goes to show that at the time, this figure of Gilgamesh really has a modern view of life. So Gilgamesh has the same idea as our modern way of life because he doesn't want to die. And he searched for immortality. Now, how does the modern world search for immortality now? Because